Yep, that's a diesel, all right, but it's not the diesel you think it is. It's not the noisy but trusted 1.3 Fiat diesel that's powered millions of Marutis for over a decade. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the all-new in-house developed 1.5 diesel that makes its debut in this Ciaz. This is a big deal because this reflects Maruti taking control of its diesel destiny. So we're going to find out how good a job they've done. But the first thing I ask myself is, why on God's not-so-green earth would India's leading auto company risk investing in diesel powertrains at a time when the future for them looks bleak? Well, it's because for Suzuki, whose life depends on the Indian market, the risk of not having a small diesel is even bigger. Okay, demand for diesels will fall, but there still will be some demand, and that's what the market leader wants to mop up as much as it possibly can. Now, coming to this new inline 4-cylinder engine, it's basically two Celerio diesels joined together, but downscaled to under 1.5 litres for tax reasons. Maruti says this engine is practically all new, with a stiffer engine block, a redesigned combustion chamber, revised valve gear, new intake and exhaust manifolds, and even a dual-mass flywheel. So first reactions of this new 1.5 diesel? Well, it's one of shock. Because quite frankly, after the 2-cylinder Celerio diesel, and this is essentially a 4-cylinder version of the same engine, wasn't expecting much. That engine was noisy, sluggish, had no power. But this one, it's just blown me away on several fronts. For one is the refinement. In fact, it's safe to say that this is possibly amongst the most refined diesels in its class. It is really quiet. You can tell it's a diesel, but when you're cruising, it's really hard to hear the diesel drone. In fact, the road noise, overpowers the engine sound. So how do they make it so refined? Well, apart from using lots of sound deadening material, optimizing the engine mounts and tweaking the intake and exhaust manifolds, Suzuki had two tricks up its sleeve. The first, as mentioned earlier, is the use of a dual mass flywheel, which is a very effective but costly way to dampen engine vibrations. The second secret is a low compression ratio. Now, lowering the compression ratio leads to smoother and progressive combustion, and this in turn leads to better refinement. This engine has been designed to meet BS6 emission standards when BS6 fuel is available and the regulations change. But for now, you can only have it in BS4 spec. On paper, this 1.5 engine produces a modest 95 horsepower and a healthy 225 Newton meters of torque. Now, neither figures are class best. But remember that at 1125 kilos, the Ciaz is the lightest car in its segment, and even a good 25 kilos lighter than the previous Multijet powered Ciaz. So out on the road, this engine provided enough oomph. In fact, in the dash to 100 kph, it's the fastest accelerating diesel midsizer around. Unbelievable. This engine has a really strong top end. It revs easily past 5,000 RPM, when most engines in this class struggle past 4,000. But the strong top end comes at a price, and that is a weak bottom end. And actually, it's largely due to the gearing, which is on the tall side, especially third gear, which is really quite tall. Shorter gearing would have made this car more responsive at lower speeds, and you do have to use the gearbox a fair bit when you're in a hurry. But if you're just ambling along, it has enough torque to pull you through. Not surprisingly, the 1.5 diesel promises best-in-class fuel efficiency and delivers a figure of 26.82 kilometers per litre under standard test conditions. Now, that figure has a lot to do with the tall gearing of the new 6-speed gearbox, which, by the way, makes its debut in the Ciaz 2. The gearbox is slick to use, fairly accurate to slot, and is complemented by a clutch that is light and progressive. Apart from the new engine, there are no changes to the Ciaz, which means you get the same spacious and airy cabin, a decently long equipment list, and a plush ride. The steering has no feel to speak of, especially around the straight ahead position, and reminds you that the Ciaz is not a car for enthusiasts. But then few diesels are. To sum it up, the new engine is remarkably refined, has sufficient punch, and lives up to Maruti's tradition of offering the best-in-class fuel efficiency. With the 1.5 diesel under its hood, the Ciaz feels more polished and takes the fight to the Honda City. It's amazing, isn't it? At a time when most manufacturers are giving up on diesel, especially small capacity diesels, Maruti Suzuki has gone and developed one completely in-house. And for a company that has no real legacy or history of diesels, they've done a pretty remarkable job with this. Now, some would say Maruti has entered the diesel race when the race is all about over. But let's not forget, Maruti is the market leader. And if they think that there is a future for diesel, there probably is.